The sun rose slowly over the endless desert, painting the sand in golden light. Its rays were already hot, burning the skin of anyone who dared to walk in its vast expanse. Rami tightened the strap of his worn leather bag and squinted at the horizon. He had been traveling for days, following an old map that promised the location of a hidden oasis. Legends spoke of clear waters, rare plants, and a peace that seemed impossible in such a harsh place. Rami was determined to find it. His feet sank slightly with every step, the sand shifting beneath him. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and took a deep breath. The desert was quiet, almost too quiet, except for the distant howl of the wind. He thought about turning back, about the safety of villages and roads he had left behind. But the call of the unknown, the thrill of discovery, pushed him forward. Each step, no matter how exhausting, brought him closer to the secret he had been seeking. As the sun climbed higher, Rami's throat grew dry, and his lips cracked from the heat. He stopped for a moment and poured a little water from his flask into his mouth. The desert was merciless, but he had prepared for this. His bag carried enough food and water for several days, and his clothes were light and protective. Still, he knew that preparation was only part of the journey. The desert had its own rules, and he had to respect them if he wanted to survive. While moving slowly, Rami noticed something unusual. Far ahead, curling faintly above the sand, was a thin wisp of smoke. It moved gently in the wind, almost like a sign. He frowned, unsure what it meant. Was someone else nearby, another traveler? Or was it a fire started by animals or a storm? His heart quickened with curiosity. Carefully, he adjusted his bag and began walking toward it. Every step felt heavier in the heat, but his curiosity was stronger than his exhaustion. As he drew closer, he realized the smoke was rising from a small cluster of palm trees. The greenery was unlike anything he had seen in the desert so far. His heart leapt. Could this be the oasis he had been searching for? The thought of cool water, shade, and life made him forget the burning sun for a moment. He quickened his pace, his boots leaving deep marks in the sand behind him. When he reached the edge of the palms, he stopped and looked around. The oasis was even more beautiful than he had imagined. A small pool of water reflected the sky, and the leaves of the trees shimmered in the sunlight. Tiny birds flitted among the branches, and he could hear the faint buzz of insects. The sight filled him with awe. In this place, the desert's harshness seemed to vanish, replaced by a quiet peace. Rami knelt by the water, cupping it in his hands to drink. The water was cool and refreshing, bringing life back to his tired body. He drank slowly, savoring the relief, and then leaned back against a palm tree, closing his eyes for a moment. The heat of the day still pressed around him, but the oasis offered a small, perfect shelter. Here, he could rest, gather his strength, and continue his search for the rare plants said to grow in this hidden place. While resting, Rami noticed movement near the water. At first, he thought it was a bird, but then he saw a figure, a young woman, stepping carefully among the palms. She seemed just as surprised to see him as he was to see her. Her eyes were bright with curiosity, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Rami stood slowly, unsure if he should speak or remain quiet. "Hello," he said finally, keeping his voice calm and friendly. The woman hesitated but then nodded. "Hello," she replied softly. They both looked at each other, realizing that neither had expected company in this remote oasis. The desert had kept its secrets well, and yet, here they were, two travelers brought together by chance. Rami studied her for a moment. She carried a small bag and wore light clothing like his own, meant to protect against the heat. Her expression was confident, but there was a hint of fatigue in her eyes. He felt a sudden connection, a recognition that they shared something, a love of adventure, a desire to explore, and perhaps the same longing to find something hidden in the vastness of the desert. For now, they simply watched each other across the water, neither moving too quickly, both respecting the stillness of the oasis. The desert sun continued its climb, but in this small, hidden paradise, time seemed to slow. Rami knew that meeting her was more than just a chance encounter. It was the start of something unexpected, a journey that would test them, challenge them, and perhaps bring them closer than either had imagined. With a deep breath, he decided to introduce himself properly. "My name is Rami," he said, offering a small smile. The woman smiled back, her eyes lighting up. "I'm Neela," she said. And just like that, two paths that had crossed in the desert began to move together, setting the stage for a journey neither of them would forget. Rami and Neela stood by the edge of the small oasis, watching the sunlight dance on the rippling water. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the palms, but here, in this hidden corner of life, time felt different. Rami could see the curiosity in Neela's eyes as she studied the surroundings, and he felt a strange mix of excitement and relief. Finding the oasis had been hard, but finding someone else here, someone who understood the thrill of discovery, made it even more special. After a few moments of quiet observation, Rami spoke first. "I've been looking for this oasis for days," he said, his voice calm but filled with awe. "The map I followed was old, and I didn't know if I would even find it." Neela nodded. "I've been searching too," she replied. "I heard about this place from a traveler long ago. They said the water is clear and the plants here are unlike any other in the desert." Her eyes shone with excitement, and Rami noticed the way her smile seemed to make the oasis feel even brighter. They decided to rest for a while under the shade of a large palm tree. Rami offered her some water from his flask, and she accepted gratefully. As they drank, they began to talk more freely, each sharing stories of their journeys. Rami spoke of deserts he had crossed, mountains he had climbed, and rivers he had discovered. Neela told him about her own travels, the strange towns she had visited, and the unusual plants she had collected along the way. The conversation was light-hearted, with small laughs and teasing remarks. Rami noticed how easily Neela's laughter blended with the gentle sounds of the oasis, birds chirping, water lapping, leaves rustling. For the first time in days, he felt truly relaxed. The desert's harshness seemed far away, replaced by the simple joy of companionship. After a short break, they decided to explore the oasis together. The water was cool and clear, perfect for dipping their hands and feet. Small fish darted among the plants near the surface, and tiny insects skimmed across the water. Rami pointed out a group of unusual flowers growing near the edge. "These must be rare," he said, carefully examining them. "I've never seen anything like this in the desert before." Neela leaned closer, brushing her fingers gently over the petals. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "I wonder what they could be used for." Rami smiled at her curiosity. He loved how she noticed details he might have overlooked. Together, they began to catalog the plants, taking notes and carefully sketching the ones they found. Their shared excitement made the work feel like an adventure rather than a task. As the day passed, the heat of the desert became stronger, but the oasis provided them shelter. They rested under the trees, eating small portions of dried fruits and bread they had brought. The air was filled with the faint scent of flowers and fresh water. Rami realized that the oasis was not just a hidden paradise, it was a place that encouraged connection, where the harshness of the world outside seemed less important. When the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the sand, Rami and Neela sat together by the water. They watched the sky turn orange and pink, the colors reflecting on the pool. It was peaceful, and yet, Rami felt a growing awareness of something deeper between them. Neela was not just a fellow traveler, she was someone who could understand his thoughts, his hopes, and perhaps even his fears. "I'm glad I met you here," Rami said quietly, looking at Neela. "I wasn't expecting anyone, but now I think it's good that we met." Neela smiled softly. "I feel the same," she replied. "It's strange, isn't it? How the desert can feel so lonely, and yet bring people together in the most unexpected places." Rami nodded, feeling warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. He realized that the journey was no longer just about finding the oasis or rare plants, it was also about sharing the experience with someone who mattered. Someone who could make the desert seem less daunting, less endless, and more like a place full of possibilities. As the night approached, they gathered dry leaves and small branches to build a small fire. The desert night was cool, and the stars appeared one by one, sparkling like tiny diamonds above. They sat close to the fire, talking quietly about their dreams and the paths they hoped to follow. For Rami, the firelight illuminated more than just the oasis, it highlighted a connection, a spark of understanding and companionship that neither of them had expected to find in the desert. By the time the moon was high in the sky, Rami and Neela lay back on the soft sand, staring at the stars. The desert was vast and quiet, but they no longer felt alone. Here, in the heart of the oasis, their journey together had begun. And as they drifted into sleep under the gentle watch of the moon, both knew that the days ahead would be full of challenges, adventures, and perhaps, the beginning of something even more extraordinary than the oasis itself. The morning sun rose over the desert, casting long shadows across the sand dunes. Rami and Neela packed their belongings near the oasis, ready to continue their journey. The water and shade of the oasis had given them strength, but the desert outside was relentless. Every step forward reminded them that nature could be both beautiful and harsh. Rami led the way, carefully scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. The sand shifted beneath their feet, and the wind carried tiny grains that stung their skin. Despite the heat, their spirits were high. Walking together, they talked about their plans and dreams, sharing the excitement of exploring a world so few had seen. As the day progressed, the desert tested their endurance. The sun was fierce, making their shadows short and forcing them to pause often. Their water supply dwindled faster than expected, and the heat made even the lightest movement exhausting. Rami noticed Neela slowing down at times, and he offered words of encouragement. "We can rest a little," he said, pointing to a small dune that would provide a brief shade. Neela smiled, grateful for his thoughtfulness. The desert was not only a physical challenge but also a lesson in trust. At one point, a strong gust of wind blew sand into their path, momentarily blinding them. Rami reached out and guided Neela to a safe spot, holding her hand to steady her. The simple gesture made them both aware of how much they had come to rely on each other. It was no longer just a shared journey, it was teamwork, understanding, and care. During a rare moment of calm, they found a small cluster of rocks where they could sit and rest. Neela took out her notebook and began sketching the desert landscape, while Rami examined the tracks left by small desert animals. Their quiet focus on the simple wonders around them created a rhythm, a shared connection that felt comforting. The desert, with all its difficulties, was teaching them patience, observation, and appreciation for small details. As they walked further, Rami pointed out a distant mirage shimmering on the sand. Neela laughed lightly. "You think that's water?" she asked. "I've learned not to trust the desert tricks," Rami replied with a smile. Their laughter echoed briefly over the dunes, lightening the weight of the day. Even in the harsh environment, moments like these reminded them of the joy in companionship. The afternoon brought a sandstorm. The wind howled, and sand whipped across their faces, making it hard to see or breathe. Rami and Neela quickly took cover behind a large dune. They crouched close, shielding each other from the worst of the storm. The noise was frightening, but their presence gave each other courage. "We'll get through this," Rami shouted over the wind. Neela nodded, holding onto him tightly for support. When the storm passed, the desert seemed even more endless than before, but they continued moving forward. Their pace was slower now, their bodies tired, yet their determination had grown stronger. Each obstacle brought them closer together, teaching them to trust not only the land but also each other. Neela admired Rami's careful planning and calmness in danger, while Rami respected Neela's courage and sharp mind. Together, they made a team capable of facing the desert's challenges. As evening approached, the sun began to sink, casting a soft orange glow over the sand. They found a small depression in the dunes where they could camp safely for the night. They built a modest fire, and the warmth of the flames mixed with the coolness of the desert evening. Sitting together, they shared a quiet meal, talking softly about the day's hardships and victories. Rami watched Neela laugh at a small story from her travels, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. The desert had tested them, pushed them to their limits, but it had also shown them a bond that was growing stronger by the hour. They were no longer just companions, they were partners, facing the world together. That night, as they lay under the blanket of stars, Rami felt a deep sense of peace. The desert was vast, harsh, and unforgiving, but with Neela by his side, it seemed less lonely and full of possibilities. The journey was far from over, but together, they knew they could overcome anything. And in the quiet of the desert night, both silently hoped that this journey was only the beginning of something greater than either had imagined. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the desert bathed in soft silver moonlight. Rami and Neela had finished setting up a small camp among the dunes. The heat of the day had faded, replaced by a cool, quiet night. The stars stretched endlessly above them, sparkling like tiny diamonds scattered across a dark velvet sky. It was a moment of peace, rare in the harsh desert, and both travelers felt its magic deeply. Rami poured a little water into his hands and sipped slowly, savoring the coolness. Neela sat beside him, her knees drawn close, gazing at the stars reflected in the sand's small shadows. Neither spoke at first, simply enjoying the calm of the desert night. The wind was gentle, carrying the soft scent of dry sand and distant desert flowers. After a while, Rami broke the silence. "The stars here, they feel so close," he said. "I've traveled many deserts, but I've never seen the sky like this." Neela nodded, her eyes still fixed on the glittering expanse above. "It feels like the whole world is watching us," she replied softly. "And yet, it's quiet, peaceful." Her voice carried a note of wonder, and Rami found himself smiling at how easily she could notice beauty in the simplest things. They decided to explore a little around their camp. Walking slowly, their feet sinking into the soft sand, they shared stories of their childhoods and the dreams that had led them to this desert. Rami spoke of his fascination with hidden places and unknown lands, how the thrill of discovery always drew him forward. Neela told him about her love for nature and her curiosity about plants and wildlife, describing how she had always wanted to travel beyond her village to see the world. As they walked, their conversation became lighter, filled with laughter and playful teasing. Neela pointed at a strange-shaped dune and said, "Do you think it looks like a giant camel?" Rami chuckled, agreeing, and they began spotting shapes in the sand, comparing them to animals, trees, and even castles. The simple game brought joy and a shared connection, making the night feel less lonely. After a while, they returned to their camp. The fire they had built earlier had burned low, casting a gentle glow on their faces. They sat close together, and Rami handed Neela a small piece of bread. "We should save some for tomorrow," he said, though his voice carried a smile. Neela accepted it, feeling comforted by the simple gesture. As they ate, Rami found himself watching Neela more than the fire. There was a quiet confidence in the way she moved, a curiosity in her eyes, and a warmth in her smile that made him feel unexpectedly at ease. Neela noticed him glancing at her, and she felt a flutter of something unfamiliar, something more than friendship. She quickly looked back at the stars, pretending to be absorbed in their beauty, though a small smile played on her lips. The desert night deepened, and the air grew cooler. They wrapped themselves in light blankets and lay on the soft sand near the fire. Silence returned, but it was comfortable now, filled with unspoken understanding. Rami reached over and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from Neela's face. She didn't move away. Instead, she turned slightly to face him, their eyes meeting in the gentle glow of the fire. For a moment, words were unnecessary. The desert around them was vast, yet in that quiet moment, they felt a closeness that had grown from shared struggles, laughter, and trust. Rami felt a strange happiness, a feeling he had not expected in the lonely desert. Neela, too, felt warmth in her heart, realizing that this journey was becoming more than just an adventure. It was a chance to connect with someone who truly understood her. Finally, Rami spoke softly, almost a whisper. "I'm glad we met here," he said, looking into her eyes. Neela smiled, a small, tender smile that carried more meaning than words could express. "Me too," she replied. "It feels right." The stars above continued to shine, watching silently as the desert held them in its quiet embrace. The fire flickered low, and the cool night wind whispered through the dunes. Rami and Neela lay back, side by side, letting the vast sky and peaceful desert wrap around them. In the stillness, they felt a new kind of connection, one that promised care, understanding, and perhaps the beginning of something deeper than either had imagined. And as sleep slowly took them under the endless desert sky, they both dreamed of the journey ahead, not just through the sand and sun, but together, facing whatever challenges, wonders, and joys the desert had in store for them. The morning sun was gentle compared to the harsh light of previous days. Rami and Neela packed their camp carefully, storing the last of their water and food. Today, they decided to explore a nearby canyon that Rami had noticed while studying the map. The narrow canyon promised hidden paths, unusual plants, and the possibility of discoveries no one else had made. Both were excited, though neither knew what awaited them. The walk to the canyon was long but easier than the open desert. The tall rock walls provided shade, and the ground was firmer beneath their boots. Neela ran her fingers along the stone walls as they walked, admiring the smooth curves carved by years of wind and water. "It's amazing how the desert can create something so beautiful," she said. Rami nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning for unusual plants or signs of wildlife. As they ventured deeper into the canyon, they noticed a small cluster of flowers growing near a shaded pool. The petals were bright, glowing in colors that seemed impossible for the desert. Rami's eyes widened. "These must be rare," he whispered. "I've read about flowers like this, but I never thought I would see them in real life." Neela knelt beside the flowers, studying them carefully. They could be very valuable, she said. Not for money, but for medicine. People could use these plants to heal. Both were thrilled by the discovery. They took careful notes and sketched the flowers, making sure not to harm them. It felt like they were part of something important, a moment of real discovery that made their journey even more meaningful. Suddenly, a distant rumble interrupted their work. Rami's head shot up, and Neela looked around nervously. Water in the canyon had started rising unexpectedly. A flash flood. Rami shouted. The canyon walls made the water move quickly, and the small pool where they had been kneeling was beginning to swell. Rami grabbed Neela's hand. "We need to climb higher, fast," he yelled. They ran toward a set of rocks leading up the canyon wall. The water surged behind them, moving faster than they expected. Rami's heart raced, but he kept calm, guiding Neela over slippery stones and keeping her balance. Every second counted. The water splashed around them, cold and powerful. Neela stumbled once, but Rami held her tightly, preventing her from falling. "We can do this," he said, his voice steady, even as the roar of the water filled their ears. Neela nodded, trusting him completely. Together, they climbed higher, their hands gripping rocks and each other, moving with care and determination. Finally, they reached a small ledge above the rising water. Both were breathing heavily, soaked, but safe. Rami looked at Neela and saw a mix of relief and admiration in her eyes. "We did it," he said, smiling despite the exhaustion. Neela laughed, a little breathless. "I knew we would, with you guiding me," she replied. After a few moments, they sat on the ledge, letting the adrenaline fade. The canyon was quiet again, except for the sound of water rushing below. Rami glanced at Neela, realizing how much he had come to rely on her courage as well. "You were amazing," he said softly. Neela smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "We're amazing together," she said. Once the water receded enough to allow safe movement, they carefully climbed back down to the pool. The flowers they had discovered were unharmed, and they documented their findings more carefully this time. The experience had bonded them even closer. They had faced danger, relied on each other, and succeeded together. It was a test of trust, bravery, and teamwork that neither would forget. As they walked back toward the desert, the sun began to dip toward the horizon. The sky turned golden, reflecting off the sand and making the world glow. Both were quiet, thinking about the day's events. Rami finally spoke, breaking the silence. "I'm glad we faced that together," he said. Neela nodded, taking his hand lightly. "It made me realize something," she said softly. "I'm glad we met here, in this desert. It's more than just an adventure now." Rami smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I feel the same," he admitted. They continued walking side by side, the desert stretching endlessly before them, but neither felt lonely. The challenges of the day had made them stronger, more connected, and more aware of the bond growing between them. That night, as they rested under the stars once again, they reflected on the day's discoveries and dangers. The desert had tested them, but it had also shown them how much they could rely on each other. The bond between Rami and Neela had grown deeper, strengthened by courage, teamwork, and the quiet moments of understanding that passed between them. And as they drifted into sleep, the cool desert breeze carried a promise: the journey ahead would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and perhaps, the beginning of something extraordinary. After the day's challenges in the canyon, Rami and Neela returned to the oasis as the sun began to lower in the sky. The golden light reflected off the water, making it shimmer like liquid fire. The oasis had never seemed more beautiful, more alive, or more welcoming. It was as if the desert itself was rewarding them for their bravery and persistence. They walked slowly, both tired but filled with a quiet sense of achievement. The flowers they had discovered in the canyon were safely noted in their notebooks, and the excitement of the day still lingered in their hearts. Neela let out a soft laugh as she stepped carefully on the edge of the water. "I can't believe we made it through that flood," she said, shaking her head. "I was so scared, but I felt safer knowing you were with me." Rami smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I felt the same," he said quietly. "We make a good team. I couldn't have done it without you." Neela's eyes softened at his words, and she looked away for a moment, letting the feelings stir inside her. She had never imagined that a simple adventure could lead to such a connection, but now, sitting beside Rami at the edge of the oasis, she realized that it had. They found a quiet spot near a cluster of palm trees, where the shadows stretched long across the sand. Rami spread a small blanket, and they both sat down, letting the cool grass and sand cushion their tired bodies. The sun's warmth was gentle now, a contrast to the harsh heat they had endured all day. The oasis was calm, and the water mirrored the sky as if inviting them to pause and reflect. Rami took a deep breath, his mind replaying the events of the day. He realized how much he had grown to care for Neela, not just as a fellow traveler, but as someone whose presence brought comfort, courage, and joy. Gathering his thoughts, he looked at her and decided it was time to speak. "Neela," he began softly, "I want to tell you something important." Neela turned to him, her eyes curious but calm. "What is it?" she asked. Her voice was gentle, almost like a whisper, carried by the soft breeze. Rami hesitated for a moment, then spoke from the heart. I've realized that I feel something more than friendship for you. Being with you, facing the desert, discovering new things together, it's made me see that I care about you, a lot." He paused, unsure of how she would respond, and his heart pounded. Neela's eyes widened slightly, and a small smile spread across her face. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Rami. I feel the same," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with warmth. "I've felt it for a while now, but I didn't know if I should say anything. Being with you, sharing these adventures, it's made me realize that I care for you too." A wave of relief and happiness passed between them. The tension of unspoken feelings lifted, replaced by a gentle closeness that neither had expected. Rami squeezed her hand, and Neela leaned slightly toward him. For a few moments, words were unnecessary. The desert, the oasis, the sun, and the sky, they all seemed to pause, holding space for this new connection between the two travelers. They spent the next hour talking quietly, sharing hopes, fears, and dreams. Neela spoke about her desire to explore more lands and learn about rare plants and animals. Rami shared his wish to discover hidden places and document the beauty of the world. Each dream they shared seemed to intertwine with the other, strengthening the bond that had grown over days of travel, laughter, and danger. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the water of the oasis turned a deep shade of gold. They sat side by side, watching the reflections of the sky ripple across the pool. There was a sense of calm, a feeling that every step of their journey, every challenge they had faced had led them to this moment. Finally, Rami turned to Neela, his voice quiet but confident. "No matter what challenges lie ahead, I want us to face them together." Neela smiled, squeezing his hand. Yes, she agreed. Together. The desert night fell, bringing cool air and the gentle sounds of the oasis at night. They lay down near the water, wrapped in light blankets, the stars shining above them like tiny guides watching over their journey. The bond between Rami and Neela was now stronger than ever, built on trust, shared experiences, and the quiet confessions of their hearts. In the stillness of the oasis, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the soft glow of the evening, both realized that this adventure was no longer just about discovering hidden places. It was about discovering each other, and the warmth and connection they had found would guide them through the desert and beyond. The morning sun rose gently over the oasis, casting long shadows across the calm water. Rami and Neela packed their belongings slowly, savoring the final moments in the hidden paradise that had given them rest, courage, and a new connection. The desert outside awaited them, wide and endless, but now they faced it together, stronger and more confident than before. As they stepped onto the sand, the warmth of the sun embraced them, but it no longer felt harsh or overwhelming. The desert seemed alive with possibility rather than danger. Rami looked at Neela, a smile playing on his lips. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked. Neela laughed lightly, brushing sand from her light clothing. "With you?" "Always," she replied. Their laughter mingled with the gentle wind, carrying a sense of joy and freedom. Every step they took into the open desert felt lighter because they were no longer alone. They walked side by side, their boots leaving prints in the soft sand. The dunes rose and fell around them, but they moved with purpose. Along the way, they pointed out small desert wonders: a cluster of bright flowers, the tracks of small animals, and the patterns left by the wind on the sand. Each discovery was shared, each moment treasured, and each step brought them closer. As the day progressed, the heat returned, but they were prepared. Their water supply was sufficient, and their light clothing protected them. The desert's challenges no longer felt daunting. Together, they could face any obstacle. Rami found that he enjoyed the way Neela's presence brought calm to his mind. Neela, in turn, admired Rami's careful planning and steady confidence. The bond they had built over days of travel had turned into trust, friendship, and something deeper. Around midday, they reached a small ridge that offered a view of the desert stretching endlessly before them. The wind carried grains of sand that sparkled in the sunlight, and the horizon seemed to meet the sky in a perfect line. They sat for a moment, taking in the beauty of the landscape. Rami spoke first, his voice quiet but filled with warmth. "It's amazing, isn't it? How the desert can be so harsh, and yet so beautiful." Neela nodded, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. "Yes. And it feels even more special when we share it," she said. Her words made Rami's heart swell with happiness. He realized that this journey, which had begun as a search for an oasis, had turned into a journey of discovery of something far greater: the connection between two hearts. They continued their journey, stopping occasionally to rest and enjoy the rare shade of small shrubs or the reflection of the sun on tiny pools of water. Each pause allowed them to talk quietly, sharing their hopes for the future. Neela spoke about the places she wanted to explore, the plants she wanted to study, and the beauty she hoped to document. Rami shared his dreams of finding hidden landscapes and learning from the world's wonders. As the sun began to descend toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, they reached a small hill overlooking a distant town. Smoke rose gently from chimneys, and the promise of civilization seemed comforting after days in the wild. Yet, for both Rami and Neela, the desert had become a home of sorts: a place of challenge, adventure, and connection. Rami turned to Neela, taking her hand in his. No matter where we go next, he said, I want to explore the world with you. Every desert, every mountain, every hidden place we can face it together. Neela smiled, squeezing his hand tightly. Yes. Together, she agreed. Her heart felt full, and a sense of excitement stirred within her. They had faced hardships, discovered wonders, and grown stronger not just as travelers, but as companions who understood and cared for each other deeply. As the sun set, they began walking toward the town, their shadows stretching long across the sand. The desert's heat faded, replaced by the cool evening air. Stars began to appear, faint at first, then brightening one by one. The same stars that had guided them, watched over them now as they moved forward, side by side. The journey ahead was unknown, filled with challenges, surprises, and adventures they could not yet imagine. But Rami and Neela felt ready, their hearts light and confident. They had discovered more than an oasis or rare flowers, they had discovered each other. The bond formed in the heat, danger, and beauty of the desert would carry them forward. With each step, the desert stretched before them, vast and full of promise. And together, Rami and Neela walked into the horizon, ready to face whatever the world had in store, knowing that no matter the heat, the storms, or the challenges, they would always have each other. The desert was endless, but so was the journey of their hearts, and this was only the beginning.